Hello, we'll go ahead and get started and just give it a minute or two for folks to get on. Let's go ahead and give it about 30 more seconds for folks to get on, then we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Mirkala Wozniak with the Clerk and Recorder's Office, and I handle communications. And I am going to go ahead and have Molly Fitzpatrick, our Clerk and Recorder, go ahead and present this evening. As we're going, go ahead. If you do have questions, you're welcome to put them into the Q&A. We probably will hold most of the questions towards the end. But hopefully you'll find this presentation informative on our activities, what happens around election night with ballot processing and in the days immediately following. So let me go ahead and introduce Molly.
Thanks, Mirkala. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for participating in this conversation. I know that it's a very busy time of the year for you all, as it is for us as well, with the official 1-week countdown until Election Day. So thanks all for taking the time to be here tonight. The outcome of this call is for candidates and members of the media to understand the processing, our ballot processing operation, and the awareness that processing continues after Election Day. Even though it might feel over, it is definitely not over. And in fact, our office has another 3 weeks or so after Election Day that we're still working to certify the election. So if an election is close, the time after Election Day is going to be very, it will be of interest to folks on this call. And so we wanted to make sure that you all are prepared for what might come in the case of a close race. And again, our office really hopes for high turnout and wide margins as well, as I'm sure you all do as well. So with that being said, we can go ahead and go into the next slide. So an overview of this presentation, again, we'll go over ballot processing, election night reporting, the 8th and the 9th day after the election, types of ballots that may be counted on the 9th day, recount scenarios, our risk limiting audit, and then information about watchers. A couple of ballot processing basics. Some of you might know these from attending our tours or visiting our website. We begin processing ballots and ballot envelopes 15 days before an election. The results are not disclosed until election day, and at this point in time, we are already sorting ballots into buckets from the start of processing. We have 2 major buckets of ballots. One bucket is accepted ballot envelopes, and the second is rejected ballot envelopes. Within the rejected ballot envelope category, there is a category of ballot envelopes that voters may take an action on to cure to have their vote count. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then there's also a subset of ballots that unfortunately cannot be cured and will not be counted. Accepted ballot envelopes include ballot envelopes where the signature is verified by our election judges. Our election judges are able to make a match from the ballot envelope to the voter's voter registration record. An envelope that includes only one ballot. The ballot is in fact for this election, and we do occasionally get ballots from previous elections, so we like to include this on here. And once the ballot is accepted, the voter is assigned vote credit in the Secretary of State's database, or SCORE, as some of you probably are familiar with. After that point in time, when the signature has been verified, the envelope is transported securely to our second floor ballot processing center, where the ballot is removed from its envelope and separated from the envelope, and it goes on to the subsequent processing stages, including flattening, where we have workers flattening the ballots so they can go through our scanning equipment. And then it's visually inspected for any problems, including coffee or food. And if that is the case, we do have election judges who duplicate that ballot so it can go into our scanning equipment. And then votes are scanned, votes are captured in our voting system, and then generated into reports on election day. Rejected ballot envelopes. Again, there are two workflows for rejected ballot envelopes. We have one subset of rejected ballot envelopes that can be cured in order to have their vote count. The voter has until the end of the 8th day after the election to respond to our notice. And again, the most frequent reason of a rejected ballot envelope would be that our election judges were not able to make a match depending on comparing the envelope to the voter registration record. Some voters, especially first-time voters that did not register to vote with a Colorado ID, are requested to include a acceptable form of ID in with their ballot envelope. If they did not include that ID, we will send them a notice that they need to do so by the 8th day in order for their ballot envelope to be moved forward and for their vote to count. And then, of course, some voters just don't sign their envelope, and so they also have the opportunity to cure their ballot. And until these voters have responded to our notice to cure their ballot, the ballot envelopes stay unopened until they're cured. And the exception, of course, would be any of those voters that have missing IDs, because we have election judges working to look at the ID and see if there is an ID in that envelope. The second category of rejected ballot envelopes are unfortunately those envelopes that we cannot count. And this is because there might be more than one ballot in the envelope, there's an empty envelope, or as mentioned, it's from a previous election. Election night reporting overview. The slide that probably everyone is most interested in. Beginning or on election day in the late afternoon, you can go to bouldercountyvotes.org, and we will be adding a link where you can go to where we'll put the election result website page on. So that is bouldercountyvotes.org. We'll begin publishing the results on our website at 7 p.m. And the first posting reflects the majority of everything counted through the Monday before Election Day. And additional result postings will absolutely continue on Wednesday and potentially Thursday until we have processed all of the ballots we can, with the exception of the buckets. And as you all have heard us say before, the more that people are able to vote early and turn in those ballots early, the more of a comprehensive overview and a more complete set of election results we can add or we can provide to the public during that 7 p.m. Upload on election night. So the earlier people vote, the more we are able to get that complete posting out to you all. So please encourage everyone to vote early so we are not counting for multiple days. Here's the schedule for our election night reporting. We'll release our first report at 7 p.m., 8:30 p.m., and then we will do our third and final at just after midnight on Wednesday/Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and then 6 p.m. on Wednesday, 6 p.m. on Thursday, and then by Friday, November 12th in the evening. And this is the week after that of the election. So again, we are encouraging everyone to get their ballots in early, so we're not processing multiple days after the election, but at this point, it does look like we are going to be in that situation. And one reason that we have this schedule designed the way we do is because every time that we do additional postings throughout the day or throughout the night, it does take away resources that would otherwise be spent tabulating ballots. So we have fewer postings, but we are working to provide more complete postings with these postings. And then on Wednesday, if something is extremely close, we may do an earlier day posting. It just depends on how close everything is, but we are planning for 6 p.m. on Wednesday, November 3rd. And one question that we always get asked is, how many ballots do you have left to count? We are going to provide figures as soon as we can. On election day and election night, people do tend to vote late, so we will provide a first estimate late on election night and again the next day as needed. And one thing that we would like to highlight is that this schedule is very similar and in alignment with other Colorado counties. We have this schedule again so we can put out as many results as we can, and then also to maintain accuracy, we want to ensure that our election workers are getting home at a reasonably decent hour before they come back early the next morning to scan, because even though these are the postings, it does not mean that we are leaving the building this early. There are still downstream processes and impacts that we need to consider. So this is the way that the schedule was designed the way it is. And these are our social media accounts, and you can communicate with us and look out for those, our updates on these accounts as we get closer to election and the day after. So the 8th and the 9th day after the election. So the majority of military and overseas voters do return their ballots by election day, but there is a federal law that requires these military and overseas voters that they have until 11:59 p.m. on the 8th day following the election for their mail ballot to arrive to our office. This year, the 8th day after the election is Wednesday, November 10th. And for those military and overseas voters, postmarks are not used because there is not a worldwide postal regulation, so they need to be to our office by 11:59 on the 8th day. Voters who turn in their ballot by 7 p.m. on election day, but they need to resolve an issue with their ballot, such as they need to cure their ballot, they have until 5 p.m. In person or 11:59 p.m. online or fax that day to cure the issue in order to have their vote move forward or their vote count. And the exception to the 8th day is when the 8th day falls on a United States Postal Service mail holiday. The 8th day is considered the next day. So for this year, ballot processing of the ballots received by the 8th day will occur by Friday, November 12th. And we do have Veterans Day on the 11th. Okay, so an overview of the buckets. There, again, are ballots that will definitely be counted and ballots that have the potential to be counted. And the ultimate number of ballots counted at the end of the 8th day period will be somewhere in between. So the 3 categories of ballots and the buckets that will absolutely be counted. So election offices have a constitutional obligation to protect voter privacy and anonymity, and so we do a lot of work to ensure that we are fulfilling that obligation. So we have 2 primary ways that we do this, multiple ways, but for the purpose of this presentation, we have 2 categories. One is called reserves, And so we reserve 3 ballots per precinct district style to preserve the anonymity for the potential cured or mail ballot UOCAVA voters that come in within that 8th day window. For this election, there are up to 855 reserve ballots. We also have VIPs, and those are voter information protection ballots. These are the ballots that come from voters who live in places where there is a unique district style within a precinct that may have so few voters vote, so that in order to protect their voter anonymity, we save their ballots and combine them with other ballots when processing during that time frame. And for this election, there are up to 190 possible ballots this election. And so essentially at this point with these ballots, we're doing some blending to ensure that folks from the public or anybody could not put publicly available reports together and the time that these ballots are processed and tie any sort of way that a voter voted to that individual. So these are 2 tools that we have in order to execute that obligation is our reserve process and our VIPs process. And again, 855 that will be counted, and then for our reserves, and then 190 that will be counted if they're received by 7 p.m. on election night. And then we also have manual process ballots, and these are ballots that require a little bit of extra attention. They came in during the last 24 hours and they are damaged. They couldn't go through the mail sorter because they are dirty or food stained, or they were impacted by weather really badly. And so we need to have workers and judges look at those envelopes and work with them to make sure that they are reviewed for voter intent. And for this election, we will have, it really depends, but we typically have around 500 of these ballots or more. And then again, there are ballots that could potentially be counted. The military and overseas ballots, these are the ballots that had the potential to be returned by mail by that 8th day and still counted. We typically don't see a lot of these ballots after election day, less than 5%. And then the ballots that need to be cured. And as some of you might be aware, we do have a publicly available report. Everyone would have to request, through a data request to get access to that. But there is a cure list. And so you appear on the cure list if you have a signature that didn't match. Again, that's the largest category, missing signature, or if you did not require ID with your ballot envelope and you were required to do so. And unfortunately, not all voters will cure their ballot, even though we want them to, and we make sure that they know they have this opportunity. So we end an election anywhere between several hundred to over 1,000 left uncured. And then if ballots are returned to another county clerk's office, we will work with county clerk's offices across the state to ensure that we are getting ballots, Boulder County ballots back to our office and vice versa. And those ballots need to be sent to us before the end of the 8th day. And then provisional ballot, this is not as much of an impact anymore in Colorado because we have the ability to issue replacement ballots at vote centers, but this could also be counted as well, depending on our provisional ballot board, but this is typically less than 10 per election. Information for recounts. I know everyone is hoping that this does not occur, as do we. We hope for, again, high turnout and wide margins, but a recount of any election will be held if the difference between the highest number of votes cast in that election contest and the next highest number of votes cast in the election contest is less than or equal to 0.5% of the highest vote cast in that election contest. And I know that's really a lot of words. We'll go through an example in the next slide. So a recount will not occur until after the Canvass board certifies the original vote count. And we have our Canvass date scheduled for Monday, November 22nd. And then the state Canvass deadline is November 24th. The state has until November 29th in order to, to order an automatic recount. And then if a recount is not required, an interested party may submit a notarized written request by November 30th for a recount at the expense of the interested party making the request. This request shall be filed with the Secretary of State, our office, within 28 days after the election. Okay, so here is an example to illustrate a recount scenario. So if you have candidate A and candidate B, the difference between these candidates, between the highest vote getter and the next candidate, is 31. And so the winning candidate vote total is less than, or it needs to be less than or equal to 0.5% in order to trigger a recount. In this case, if you look at the math, the margin is more than 0.5%, so there is no automatic recount required. And the same rule applies to a multiple candidate race. So let's say that there is a contest where the top 5 win. So there's a difference between the 5th and the 6th place. If you're in that 6th place, you're wondering, is this enough room for a recount, or is there a few enough votes to separate us and get us within that recount territory? So again, if we look at the math, between candidate 5 and candidate 6 is 125 vote difference, and the winning candidate vote total, candidate 5 or candidate 5th place, is 8,986. Again, the difference between the candidates in order to trigger an automatic recount would be less than or equal to 0.5%. In this case, the difference does not equal that. It equals 1.3%, so no automatic recount is required. So one thing our office gets asked a lot is whether we can call an election for a particular candidate or issue. We absolutely cannot and don't do that. We just provide everyone with the facts on the numbers of the ballots counted and what is left to be counted. And again, we will work to provide that information to you throughout the election processing or the ballot processing window. Again, here are the important dates to be aware of. We can receive cures through 11:59 p.m. on the 8th day. And then ballot processing occurs on the 9th day, and we will update the unofficial election results on the evening of Friday, November 12th. Typically, results do not change after this date, and the final certified results are expected late in the day, Monday, November 22nd. And again, that is the date when we have our canvass board, and those are the canvass board includes myself and then a member from the Republican and the Democratic Party to review and certify the election. And that is when they become official. We also have a Colorado risk limiting audit as part of our post-election procedures. So Colorado is the first state to implement a statewide risk limiting audit, and the first state where it has been fully operationalized, meaning every county in Colorado is doing it, unless you are one of the 2 counties that are a hand count county because you were that small. The risk limiting audit is considered the gold standard audit. It is statistically based and it uses resources very wisely. A risk limiting audit audits election results. It does not audit the equipment. So what happens is the Secretary of State's office will tell us what ballots we need to compare to the way that the voting system read those ballots. And so that is how the risk limiting audit works. It's comparing the hand marked ballot to the cast vote record, which will go into the next slide. So the risk limiting process in a nutshell, during the ballot scanning process, you can see on the slide that there is a date stamp, which scanner was used, and the ballot batch information. That is added to the individual ballot, and every single ballot has this information imprinted on it as part of the scanning process. Every ballot has a unique identifier. Votes are then captured for that particular ballot in the voting system, and that is where the cast vote record is where this information is recorded in terms of how the voting system interpreted that ballot. After the election, each county provides the cast vote record from its voting system to the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State then tells counties which ballots and which contest to audit. The physical paper ballots are pulled and we compare the votes on the ballots to the votes recorded in the cast vote record. And then the results of that audit are reported to the Secretary of State's office. And this is how the public can see and validate that the election outcome is correct. So this is the timeline for the risk limiting audit. It is open to the public, and our audit date is November 16th, and we will provide information on our website. This information is already on our website, so if you'd like to attend, it is open to the public. We can go to the next slide. And then since you all, some of you probably already know this, I know we've had some watchers involved in the process thus far, but if you would like to appoint a watcher to observe election activities, you may do so. We have a couple of things that we need to see from these watchers, including a certificate of appointment and an oath of watcher. Watchers need to complete the training course, and then they get a 2021 certificate of completion. And then we will ensure that the watcher gets to the right place and that they have a designated watcher host who can help answer any questions that they have. And then after their first time, they can go directly to the ballot processing center and present their certificate of appointment and go on with their watching activities. So that is the process for watchers. And if anyone has any questions about that, we're happy to answer them. And that's all we have. So in terms of next steps, we want to really highlight Ballot Track. This is so voters can track the life cycle of their ballot. We do an auto enrollment of voters here in Boulder County so they can see when we mail their ballot, when we receive their ballot, and when their ballot has been moved on to processing. And again, or not again, I don't think we've talked about this yet, but if a voter needs to take action in order to have their ballot envelope cured, we will let them know via Ballot Track as well. And then here's all of our social media platforms. We are really highlighting our office as the trusted source of election information, as well as the Colorado County Clerks Association and the Colorado Secretary of State's office for trusted sources of election information. And we also have an election alert hotline, and we encourage everyone to use that hotline. If you see something online that doesn't seem right, or if you see something of concern, feel free to email electionalert@bouldercounty.org. And we know that there's a lot of mis and disinformation out there, and we're doing everything that we can to combat that misinformation and ensure that every voter in Boulder County has the accurate information that they need in order to participate in their democracy. So with that, I just want to say again, thank you for being here, and we'll open it up to questions. And I will also kick it over to Mercala to facilitate those questions, and as well as if Mercala wants to add anything to what I've said today.
Hi there. I just went ahead and dropped into the Q&A there 2 things to highlight on our website. One is we are having an election information presentation geared more to the public tomorrow. So that's more high level on the election, ballot processing, election security. And so that's happening tomorrow at noon. It's highlighted right at the top of our website. We also have been collecting, we have a survey up on our website as well regarding next year's vote centers. Since it's a larger election, we collect public inputs on where those locations should be. So obviously I know there's some candidates on this website, so please check that out. As well, if you're hearing feedback on where vote centers should be, especially in these larger elections, as well as drop boxes. Again, that is on our website. It's actually on, like, if you're on a desktop, it's in the main menu bar on the blue buttons. So those are just 2 things to look into if you're interested. And again, that election information presentation tomorrow is more geared to voters and the public. So if you have voters that have security concerns, that's a great webinar for them to hop on, and we should be recording that as well. It's a very, if anyone's attended our presentations in the past, it's going to be pretty similar to presentations in the past, and with obviously a few highlights that we've done this year on some security work we've done and some legislative highlights. But if anyone has any questions, I don't see any right now, but I'll leave it open for another minute or so. And you can also, if you don't think of something now, we will also, I can collect questions as well if you want to send me any questions, and I'm happy to follow up. If I don't have the answer, I will work with with Molly and our elections director to make sure we get you questions, because I know the election's a week away and you have a lot on your minds. So, all right, well, I don't see any questions. Thank you everyone for joining. Any other comments, Molly?
I don't think so. Just to back up what you said, just feel free to get in touch with our office should anything pop up between now and next week. And we wish everyone the best of luck and stay well and healthy the next couple of weeks. And thank you for participating.
Great. Thank you, everyone.